Ralph.
All right, then it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October 2024 SKIP Executive Board meeting. We'll go ahead and call it to order. I will be sitting in for our chair today. She is at NLC, so where I was wondering if we would get to quorum, because I know a lot of folks are currently in, I think Tampa is where that meeting is right now, but we're there, so that is good news. Called the meeting to order. Claire, if you could please go ahead and call the roll.
Certainly. City of Auburn, Nancy Backus. I know she's not here. City of Kent, Dana Ralph.
I am here. Good afternoon.
City of Burien, Liz Steed.
I'm here. Happy to see everyone.
City of Covington, Christina Soltis. Didn't see her come on yet. City of Des Moines, Tracy Buxton.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Thank you. City of Federal Way, Brian Davis. Brian let me know earlier that he is at the airport.
I am here. I'm traveling, but I'm here. So sorry for being off camera.
Super. Thank you. Glad you can make it. City of Maple Valley, Sean Kelly.
I'm here, and Councilor Schroff is here too.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Welcome. City of Normandy Park, Eric Zimmerman.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
City of Renton, Carmen Rivera. Didn't see her. All right. City of SeaTac, James Lovell. I see him. I didn't hear him though.
Testing.
Yep.
There
Okay.
we go.
Okay, I am here. Thank you.
City of Tukwila, Thomas McLeod.
Here.
Thank you. And King County, Sonari Marshall. Welcome back.
Here. Thank
Yay.
you. Good to see y'all.
Okay. All right. So that roll call, it serves as introduction and verification for our executive board members. Claire, do we have any advisory board members on the call today?
Let's see. Let me just see if anyone made it. I know a couple of our members were going to, we have one coming right now. Hi, Rumi. Hi, welcome. Hey,
Thank you.
would you mind introducing yourself to the board? We just got to that point and you have perfect timing.
It was beautiful timing.
I knew it. I'm Rumi Takahashi. I'm a principal at SMR Architects, and I'm on the SKIP Advisory Board.
Nice. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I think, let me just check one more place. Nope, that's it. Rumi is here to represent the advisory board.
All right, wonderful. And then we've got quite a few members from our staff work group. Claire, you want to call on our staff work group members, and so then everybody knows who's on the call?
Certainly. Let's start with Matt Torpy, City of Maple Valley. And Matt, if you don't mind just popcorning to the next person you see, if everyone else could do that. Thank you.
Yeah, Maple Valley Community Development Manager here to support Mayor Kelly and Councilmember Schroff, and I'll hand it over to Michaela with King County.
Hello, Michaela Daffern, she, her pronouns, and I work for King County's Department of Community and Human Services, and I'll pass it to Angie.
Thanks, Michaela. Angie Mathias. I work for the City of Renton in the Long Range Planning Group, staff support to Councilmember Rivera. I'll pass it over to Nicholas.
Hi, thanks, Nicholas Matz, Community Development Director, City of Normandy Park, here supporting Mayor Zimmerman. Daphne?
Daphne Hernandez, City of Covington Associate Long Range Planner, and I will sit over, I don't know who else, someone has skipped panelists, so their name updated.
How about Laurel?
I think
Laurel Humphrey, City of Tukwila.
How about Alex?
There we go. I'm so sorry. This is Alexandria Teague. I am the Planning Services Manager for the City of Auburn.
and Evan.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Evan Maxim. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for the City of SeaTac.
Thank you. And I think that's it.
All right, and I do want to put on the record that Councilmember Soltis has joined us. Good afternoon. So we'll add that to the roll call. All right. With that, we'll move into the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. Claire, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
We do not, and I will check the audience to see if anyone would like to raise their hand. I don't see anyone providing public comment.
All right. Next item on our agenda is approval of the October 18th, 2024 minutes. Does anybody have any changes or questions on those before we look for a motion? Okay, seeing none, a motion would be in order to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion. Sean, Maple Valley.
Second, Tracy, Des Moines.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries and minutes stand as published. Claire, do we have any changes to today's agenda before we dive into the substance?
There are no changes.
All right. So first item we have is the Housing Capital Fund. In a short 2 years, SKIP has made tangible difference in the lives of people in South King County by committing funds to over 500 units of affordable housing. We need to let that sink in. We do not celebrate that enough. That's pretty incredible work. Really, really grateful for that. Today, we're building on that success with our 3rd annual Housing Capital Fund, which will directly impact our community and provide more of that essential housing to our residents. I'm going to turn it over to Claire to provide the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So I am going to attempt to share my screen. Get this up for you. Okay. My show. Let's see. Are you seeing the notes?
Yeah, we're seeing
You are seeing the preview. We don't want that. One second. Oh, my apologies. Nope. Okay, let me try this again. Best laid plans. Over here. Oh. Oh my goodness. Okay. Sorry about this, folks. Okay. All right. Here's what we're gonna do. All right. First, I may need your help in getting this up. Yeah. Hey, Dorsal.
Yes, 1 second.
That would be fantastic. It's in the primary folder. Advisory board recommendation. Thank you. Look at that, all ready to go. Should have asked you for help in the first place. Can everyone see those slides? I'm seeing the yes. Thank you all. Thank you for your patience. Apologies for that. So, this is an exciting day. And I am really thrilled to be able to tell you that the SKIP Advisory Board has completed their review of the applications submitted to SKIP's 2024 Housing Capital Fund, and that I'm here today to present their funding recommendation for your consideration. Also, I'd like to acknowledge that this is the first year that every SKIP member city contributed to the Housing Capital Fund. And really there is power in numbers. You've heard me say this before, but you know, as a board and as a group representing South King County, I think this really is something to celebrate and to feel proud about how you've rallied your cities to unite for the purpose of building and preserving affordable housing right here in the subregion. So thank you all. The memo, which details the advisory board's recommendation, was sent to you this past Wednesday, November 13th at 6:21 p.m. from myself. And you can view that memo in your calendar invite as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we have 3 goals today under this agenda topic. First, we'll review the advisory board's funding recommendation. Second, we'll review the projects and the funding rationale and recommended special conditions. Third, I'll be seeking a final recommendation from you, the executive board, which either concurs with the advisory board's recommendation or amends the recommendation. Next slide, please. So to briefly review our timeline, after the executive board adopted the funding guidelines for the 2024 SKIP Housing Capital Fund back in the spring, we opened the application round and accepted proposals through September 13th, along with scheduling these pre-applications during that time as well. On October 3rd, the advisory board reviewed applications we received, including a summary of each project. At last month's executive board meeting, we did a similar exercise here of reviewing each project at a high level. At the November 7th advisory board meeting, we reviewed each project again, and a funding recommendation was developed with unanimous support. So my hope is that today you will be able to finalize a funding recommendation that I will then seek concurrence on from our member cities beginning in January. Next slide, please. So when the projects were presented to the advisory board, there were several items that they considered. In addition to the recommended funding amount, they were asked to discuss their rationale and any special conditions on the grant or loan that they wanted included. As the administrator of the contracts, they also supported my ability to add the standard and special conditions. The advisory board understood the importance of helping previously awarded SKIP projects to completion in this time of high interest rates and rising costs of construction. They understand that by funding a project that is applying to other funders as well, SKIP funds serve as a green light for that project and says to those funders that this is a priority for South King County. Project readiness was also a consideration. They considered how well aligned each project was with SKIP's priorities, and they understood the importance of preservation and home ownership at this moment in time, and that it is a high priority for you, the executive board. So I've mentioned this before to you, but I requested that they limit their recommendation to 3 or 4 projects, given the limited staff capacity for managing these contracts. I also discussed my preference to contract for at least approximately $1 million. And there is also no requirement that all the funds be spent. There's also an exciting development I wanted to share with you regarding the city of Renton. And I don't think Councilmember Rivera is here, but we know she's well aware of this and supportive. But of the 6 applications we received this year, 2 are in Renton, and both projects are eligible to receive House Bill 1590 funds. This is generally our larger pot of money that we have available. So the city of Renton collects House Bill 1590 funds, but has not taken action to pool those funds with SKIP. SKIP pulls these funds from 3 out of the 4 cities in South King County, Kent, Covington, and Maple Valley. City of Renton staff and myself discussed the possibility of them directly supporting these projects. And after discussions with their electeds and mayor, City of Renton staff will be bringing a recommendation to Renton City Council to financially support the two projects that apply to SKIP that are in Renton and eligible for those House Bill 1590 funds. So more specifically, these include fully funding the request by Homestead Community Land Trust Willowcrest 2 project for $600,000 to support homeownership opportunities for families experiencing homelessness, and seed money for St. Stephen Housing Association way back in Steelhouse, which will serve residents transitioning out of homelessness. So these two projects were removed from SKIP's competitive list of projects under consideration prior to the advisory board making their funding recommendation. And we are really thrilled at this opportunity and really want to thank the staff and electeds in Renton for being such a fantastic partner and leading the South King County contribution of these projects in their city. So I'll be sharing my expertise on the specialized contracting needed for these types of projects with their staff in order to move these projects forward. So just a big shout out to the city of Renton and looking forward to collaborating with them. Next slide. So conflict of interest. So since our advisory board is comprised not only of passionate community members of South King County, but also subject matter experts employed by organizations affiliated with affordable housing production and preservation, there were a few disclosed conflicts of interest I want to make you aware of. So 3 members are employed by project applicants or partners on an application. Those members did not participate in the evaluation of the projects, the discussion, or the deliberation, nor did they vote on the final recommendation. And then 4 additional advisory board members had potential conflicts of interest. 2 members are employed by organizations that have partnered with applicants in the past. 1 member is employed by a city where the project is located. And 1 member is employed by an organization that provided one of the applicants' housing vouchers. So these members participated in deliberations and voted on the recommendation. The disclosures happened at the beginning of the past 2 advisory board meetings and prior to the vote being taken. And so with those potential conflicts of interest disclosed, let's move on to the funding recommendation from the advisory board. Dorsal, next slide. So the advisory board recommends funding for 4 projects totaling $4.1 million. Of this total, the advisory board recommends using $1,030,000 of the total $1,035,141 sourced from Substitute House Bill 1406 revenue contributions for 1 homeownership and 1 preservation project, and $2,770,000 of the total $2,775,969 sourced from House Bill 1590 revenue contributions for 2 new construction projects, and $300,000 of the total $300,000 sourced from general funds. That was the City of SeaTax contribution to be applied to that same home ownership project. So the recommendation leaves a balance of $5,141 in Substitute House Bill 1406 funds and $5,969 in House Bill 1590 funds in the Housing Capital Fund that will roll over into the next funding round in 2025. So the balance included on the first page of the memo I sent Wednesday includes incorrect fund balances, but they're off by maybe $100. And I will include the corrected version in the memo that goes to councils, and the numbers I cited to you just now are the correct ones. So you can see on the table, the advisory board recommends funding the Mercy Housing Northwest Burien Family Housing Project at the full requested amount of $2 million. The TWG Pandean at Star Lake at a reduced amount than what they requested. This totals $770,000. The Multi-Service Center White River Apartments at a reduced amount than they requested at $775,000. And the Habitat for Humanity Burien Miller Creek at a reduced amount as well at $555,000. $6,000. So next slide, please. So I thought it would be helpful to go through each project at a high level to remind you what these projects are, refresh your memory, and here the funding rationale and special conditions from the advisory board. So Burien Family Housing is a multifamily 91-unit rental project located near high-frequency transit in Burien. The project will support households earning between 30% AMI and 60% AMI with a focus on households with children, including 34 units set aside for families with children exiting homelessness and 18 units set aside for households with a physical disability. The project includes the redevelopment of a 4-acre site currently owned by Mary's Place, which operates an emergency shelter on site. Mary's Place will be donating 2 acres of the project site to Mercy Housing while retaining over an acre for the site for their own redevelopment of a new shelter to replace the existing one. The development is comprised of a mix of 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. 52% of the units are family-sized 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. So this project received a financial award from SKIP during our first funding round back in 2022. And they have also since secured funding from King County, the Department of Commerce, and received a 9% low-income housing tax credit, bond allocation, and the Amazon Housing Equity Fund over the course of last year and this year. The project is a combination 4%, 9% LIHTC project. They have also secured 34 project-based vouchers from the King County Housing Authority and a resident services award from King County to support the families exiting homelessness. And next slide, please. Thank you. So the advisory board likes this project for many reasons and recommended funding it at $2 million in House Bill 1590 funds. So the project is ready to begin construction in early 2025. The project has been awarded significant financial contributions from King County, Commerce, Amazon, including our almost $1.1 million award in the 2022 funding round. So the sponsor's partnership with Mary's Place demonstrates a commitment to serving households experiencing homelessness and will develop a pipeline of permanent housing for Mary's Place clients. And the project strongly aligns with SKIP Housing Capital Fund adopted priorities, including collaboration with local community-based organizations, connections and direct experience with populations the project is proposing to serve, addressing the needs of populations most disproportionately impacted by housing costs, advancing economic opportunity, providing rental housing for individuals and families earning 0 to 30% AMI, incorporating supportive services, and leveraging those private and public investments. Special conditions for this project include providing the funds in the form of a deferred contingent forgivable loan. Funding commitment lasts 36 months from the original award, and I've confirmed that this works for the applicant. And at least 34 of the housing units will be set aside for families with children exiting homelessness who earn no more than 60% AMI, and 18 of the housing units shall be set aside for households with a physical disability who also earn no more than 60% AMI. The project description of the original award from 2022 will be replaced by the current description of the project, meaning the latest version of this project trumps what was previously presented. And the previous funding award shall be combined with the current recommended award, but will retain the eligibility of the use under the restricted RCW, since we have 2 separate funding sources for this. We'll just make the contract language work so they're able to use both pots of money for the restricted use. Next slide, please. Thank you. So your memo contains details on the differences between the project proposal from 2022 and this year, but I wanted to present a summary of those changes for you. Changes include 39 fewer units for families with children and fewer 30% and 60% AMI units. The current project added 18 units for households with a physical disability, 22 units for the general population, 1 unit for an on-site manager, 1 additional affordable unit, more 50% AMI units, and added the 9% LIHTC component. And I just want to pause here and say, you're thinking, this is a lot of information, Claire. Why are you presenting all this detail? And I want to let you know, it is because it's in our interlocal agreement that all of your cities have adopted, that we do present this information to you and that they adopt it as well. And so for those that are newer to this process, just wanted to let you know that's why we're talking about this stuff at this point in this much detail. So just wanted to flag that for you. All right, next slide, please. All right, moving on to TWG. So Pandean at Star Lake is a 251 unit multifamily mixed use rental project in Kent, located adjacent to the Kent Star Lake Link light rail station. The project will support households earning between 30% AMI and 80% AMI. 47 units will support households up to 80% AMI. The project has been proposed as a 4% LIHTC development. The project secured an award from SKIP in the 2023 Housing Capital Fund funding round, totaling $1,170,000, and has been modified this funding round. This TOD project will provide a mix of studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The project will include ground floor commercial space consisting of a K-12 learning center for low-income children operated by the Renton-based STEM Paths Innovation Network, or SPIN. And the property was purchased by the developer in December 2022. The 251 units includes 163 units for the general population, 59 units for families with children, and 29 units for families with children that require permanent supportive services and are at risk of being homeless. 24 of the units would be accessible units. So 29 units of the project are eligible for House Bill 1590 funds, which includes those units for families with children at risk of homelessness and require permanent supportive services who earn up to 30% AMI. And those units would be served by Vision House, and they would provide on-site supportive services. Next slide, please. So the advisory board recommend funding this project at $770,000 in House Bill 1590 funds. The project, they liked this for a lot of reasons. I've mentioned previously, but supporting those 29 families with children at risk of homelessness was a high priority for them. The project secured a prior funding award from SKIP, and additional funds will assist the project to leverage other funding sources. The construction start date is anticipated by early 2026, and the sponsor may have a little bit more time than some of the other projects that were competing for this in the same pot of money. The project's located adjacent to the future Kent Star Lake Link light rail station, so it has convenient access to transit, schools, grocery stores, and more. The strong partnership with Vision House was a huge plus. And the project is a larger project and will provide a high number of affordable units near areas with high displacement risk potential. And it also aligns with SKIP Housing Capital Fund adopted priorities. Special conditions include funding provided in the form of a deferred 1% interest non-forgivable loan to the LIHTC partnership, a funding commitment that lasts 36 months from the original award, and at least 29 housing units of the total will be set aside for families with children at risk of homelessness who earn no more than 60% AMI per the requirements of RCW 8214-530. And similar to the previous project, the current version of this project, as it's been described to you, would replace the previous version of the project, and the 2 awards would be combined into one. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the changes to this project since 2023, those include changing from 2 buildings to 1 and removing the building that would have served seniors at 80 to 100% AMI. The new project doesn't include units for households transitioning out of homelessness or households with an intellectual or developmental disability. They are no longer applying for the combo 4%, 9% LIHTC award, and they're going to stick solely with the 4% low-income housing tax credit. And it's a smaller project reduced by 90 units. So they've added 80% AMI units. They've added more 50% and 60% AMI units and added more units for families with children and the general population. Next slide, please. So the White River Apartments is a multifamily preservation and rehabilitation 24-unit rental project in Auburn. The building was constructed in 1978 and Multi-Service Center took over ownership in 2000. The project consists of 24 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom units in active use, which includes 3 units serving households earning up to 30% AMI, 16 units at 45% AMI, and 5 units at 80% AMI. The 80% AMI units are currently occupied by households earning less than 60% AMI, and those units would shift to income restricted up to 60% AMI if funding is awarded. SKIP funds are requested to support the rehabilitation of the 24 units, including siding replacement, site lighting, parking lot improvements, replacing domestic hot water tanks, regrading areas adjacent to siding, and replacement of exterior entry doors. And this project previously applied to the 2023 Housing Capital Fund. Next slide, please. So the project was a high priority for the advisory board, and they recommended funding it at $775,000 with substitute House Bill 1406 funds. So the property is in need of rehabilitation to support the health and safety of the residents. The property is made up of 2-bedroom units to support larger household sizes. And then the limited SKIP funds available this year required a partial award, which will still allow the majority of the residential building rehabilitation to move forward. And then similar to last year, we talked about the challenges for these smaller rehab and preservation projects competing for funding at the state level. And the focus has typically been on for public funders on creating new units of affordable housing, and smaller preservation projects like this one are just not as competitive against larger projects competing for those same funds. So the project applied for funding in early 2024 to the Department of Commerce, and SKIP provided a letter of support, but they were not successful in securing funding at that time. And the project strongly aligns with SKIP's Housing Capital Fund adopted priorities. Special conditions include funding being provided in the form of a grant with no repayment, funding commitment lasting 36 months, that funds shall be used solely for the rehabilitation of the property and may include a specified list, which is included in your memo, and that the advisory board had a very specific special condition for this project, and that being that funds will be prioritized to support building improvements, and that parking lot improvements shall not be funded in favor of residential building rehabilitation. And this part was important to them in order to justify not fully funding the project in order to provide funds for the Bury and Miller Creek project, which we'll get to next. And then similar to last year, you all wanted to include language around should cost overruns occur that require funds above what SKIP is contributing, that the sponsor will work towards filling the funding need through their capital budget process or seeking funds through other sources. Next slide, please. All right, we're almost there. This is the last one. So Bury and Miller Creek is a 40-unit home ownership project in Burien. The project is comprised of 3- and 4-bedroom homes for purchase, 20 units for households earning an average 50% AMI, and 20 units for households earning up to 80% AMI. The project is currently under construction, and SKIP awarded the project $300,000 in the 2022 funding round, which has been requested to support the construction of 5 units for households earning an average of 50% AMI, not to exceed 60% AMI. And all home buyers must have lived in King County for at least 1 year, and 25% of the homes are reserved for households with a connection to the community, being defined as within 2 miles from the project. The project will provide permanent affordability through the execution of a ground lease upon sale of the home. And Habitat requires that the home must be the buyer's primary residence and must be owner occupied for the life of the home. The buyer's housing costs will be kept at or below 35% of gross household income. The project has secured awards totaling $23 million and reports a funding gap of $3.3 million. This is due to increased construction costs, higher interest rates on construction loans, and lower mortgage revenue due to Habitat's commitment to serve families at lower AMIs in this development. Next slide, please. So this project was a high priority for the advisory board, and they recommended funding it at $555,000, with $300,000 sourced from general funds and $255,000 sourced from Substitute House Bill 1406 funds. Reasoning for the award: home ownership is a high priority for SKIP. The community preference policy is a strength. The investments from the various funders. The project began vertical construction in October of this year. It's fully permitted. Habitat's historical record of serving families that identify as BIPOC. Limited funds required this partial award, competing with that preservation and rehabilitation project. They are larger family-sized homes with 32 3-bedrooms and 8 4-bedrooms. The project was also approved for participation in the City of Buryon's Affordable Housing Demonstration Program. So special conditions include funding being provided in the form of a secured grant with no repayment, a funding commitment lasting 36 months from the original award, and the project description of the original award would be replaced with the current one. And the proposed $300,000 from the general fund contribution would support the development of 5 housing units at an average 50% AMI on initial sale. And this is among the 20 housing units that have an average of 50% AMI. And those would be permanently restricted at 70% AMI upon resale. So we're trying to allow the project to use those general funds in a more flexible way that works best for Habitat, and this is what they requested the $300,000 general funds be used for. The other funds, the proposed $255,000 and the previously awarded $300,000 from 2022 that's sourced from our 1406 funds, those would support the development of 5 units at an average 50% AMI on initial sale and be permanently restricted not to exceed 60% AMI. So next slide. Thank you. So in terms of the changes to this project since 2022, those include really getting rid of phase 1 and phase 2 and building all units basically at the same time. And they modified the AMI level on 20 of the 40 units from a maximum 50% AMI to an average of 50% AMI, a very, very small difference. But still wanted to just make you aware of that. And then Habitat also requested SKIP funds support the 5 units instead of the 20 units, with absolutely no change to the total number of units for the project. So should the executive board move forward with supporting the funding recommendation from the advisory board, to me, it assumes that you are also supportive of the revised proposals on the project's previously awarded funds as we've presented today. Next slide, please. All right, so this was not included in your memo, but this will be included in the memo to your councils and presented as well. So these are the proposed funding sources for the recommended projects for each of our funding sources. And we're starting here with our House Bill 1590 funds. And so you can see on the slide each city's contribution towards that specific project. And this is a requirement of our ILA. So folks know how much of their funds are being allocated by project, and then how much is left over as well. And the unallocated amount is the amount left over at the end of this cycle that will then carry over into next year. So next slide, please. And this is the amounts for the substitute House Bill 1406 funds by jurisdiction. So you can see there. And then our last slide. Thanks, Dorsal. So this is the general funds, or those unrestricted funds that City of SeaTac contributed, and they would all be allocated to that Miller Creek project. And Dorsal, you can stop sharing your slides. And that's it. That is the recommendation. Would love to take questions, comments. No, it's a lot of information.
No, thank you, Claire. I appreciate the detail, and I think as we have spoken before, it's important as projects change that the board be aware of where those changes are occurring. So the detail in that piece, I am thankful for. So this is an action item, but we definitely want to have discussion before heading into action. So any questions, Carmen?
Hi, sorry, I don't care for iPads, and we get the cancel iPads, and it's always a learning curve for me getting the Zoom from my computer to my iPad, and forgive me. I was a few minutes late, so I do apologize. I was right here when Claire started her presentation. I'm very excited for the Renton project. Thank you so much for the shout out on that. It's super exciting, and it's exactly like one of the reasons I got into this. So thank you. My question is around the last project, Habitat for Humanity, and I brought this up last meeting as well. But can I get some concrete examples as to what it means to have ties to the community within 2 miles of the projects? What are there? Is there a list? I mean, how is that kind of determined and quantified and decided? Because when we don't have, I think, a quantification of it, I get nervous that exceptions will be made. There could be discrimination. That's where we get bias playing into things, where it's well, they work at this coffee shop over here, but this is, and this is 2.1 miles outside of this, but they work over here. I'm just wondering, how hard and fast, how's that being quantified? What are some hard examples, and how are they going to be held accountable to that?
Thanks. Yeah, looking for my unmute button. So yeah, we reached out to Habitat to get clarification on that and submitted the answers to the board. I don't know if you had a chance to see those, or if you want a little more clarification on it.
More on the accountability piece, and on kind of how that's going to be followed through on.
I mean, my understanding of how they're going to do that is it's very flexible. It's very flexible how they're defining it. They want to kind of keep that open. And in my discussions with them, it was anything from, they attend a religious service within 2 miles. They have family members maybe within 2 miles. Maybe they grew up there within 2 miles, but they are now living outside of the city in King County. Because the other requirement is that all homeowners have resided in King County in some capacity within the previous year.
And I'm sorry, I guess, and I did get your response and I do appreciate that. And I'm sorry that I'm diving into this a little bit deeper, but I guess how are they expected to prove that? That's how I should have just framed it. How are they expected to kind of prove that concretely to somebody?
My understanding is Habitat is open to it. If they say that they're attending, maybe they're, making a phone call to the church, or maybe they're getting a letter from, from that organization or something like that.
Understood. Okay. That's what I was trying to get at, is in terms of like, when we have these types of quantifiers, I think they're great and I agree with them and they make sense. But how, when we rubber hits the road, are they actually quantified with how I was trying? Because I understood them. It was just more like, how are they going to prove it? And so I'm sorry I wasn't clearly stating that. But thank you for answering my question. But I do appreciate you. And the presentation was very fantastic. I was typing away, and you were very efficient. And I got all my notes. And I do appreciate the information that is sent out before, because if you don't read it beforehand, it's really helpful.
Thank you.
The memo came a little late this year, and I think I mentioned at the last meeting that the advisory board recommendation came last Thursday, and we had a holiday Monday, so it was I would have preferred to get you that information in advance of Wednesday, but that's why we're digging deep today. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate all the work you do. Sorry. I just want to say again, I do appreciate all the work you do. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Tracy.
Thanks. Somehow I've got an updated app and I can't find my raise hand function, so I'll have to work that. Thank you. Excellent presentation. And I am really impressed at the work of the advisory board. This is a lot of work and a lot of detail to go through and to make really great, in my opinion, great recommendations, great decisions. I really appreciate their work. So I did have a trivia question when you were talking about the Habitat, the Miller Creek property, and you mentioned that it was changed from that we're funding 5 units versus the 20 units. Does that mean that all of our money is just going to go into 5 of these units and only 5 of them will be home ownership opportunities? What did that mean?
Yes. So the original request back in 2022 was that SKIP funds be spread across the 20 units at the 50% AMI level. So the project was always going to include those 20 units, but over the course of the years, as Habitat got additional public funders in the project and funds became less restrictive, like could be used up to 80% AMI, they kind of recalculated and we're hoping that our funds would support fewer units, so that over time on some of the units, they could resale at a higher amount. And so the request as it stands right now is that SKIP funds would support, it sounds like a total of 10 units. 5 units would be are spread with our 300,000 general fund contribution, the unrestricted. Those would be income restricted at initial sale to an average 50% AMI. And then when that home is resold, whenever that is, in 30 years, in 5 years, that home could be sold up to 70% AMI. And then our restricted funds that only allow us up to 60% AMI cap, those funds would support 5 units and it would be resold in perpetuity at an average 50% AMI, not to exceed 60% AMI.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think it just means that they were able to categorize some of their units differently instead of all of them being the same. But, and our money could, okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Appreciate the explanation.
Right. Other questions for Claire? All right. I am not seeing any hands raised or hands waving. Tracy, I have the same thing every time Zoom changes. It moves the hand raise function. So job security for people at Zoom is all I can come up with. With that, if there are no more questions, then a motion would be in order to approve funding recommendations as presented and forward that recommendation to member city councils.
I make the motion, Sean from Maple Valley. And good job, Claire.
Second, Brian from Fedway.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you.
Aye.
All right, I think we got everybody. Is there anybody opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Claire, very much for the presentation and all the work to get us to this point. Good things being done in and around South County. All right, our next agenda item, notification of awarded housing capital project changes. Projects funded by SKIP often change in between the time the funds are awarded and contract execution. Talked a little bit about that in that first presentation. The executive board has not yet discussed under what circumstances we'd like to be informed about these changes and when we might need reauthorization for funding. And so we really want to take a minute to talk about that. A lot of these projects are longer term as they're piecing funding together, but what constitutes a major change? When does this group want to hear about those changes? Sort of what is that threshold? And then again, what is the threshold to say, you know what, that's not what we originally intended, and maybe we don't want our funding to continue to go to that project. I think it's an important conversation. Again, we're only in year 3, so we have not had, we're going to learn as we go. Right? These things are going to continue to come up. So Claire, I'm going to turn it over to you for the presentation and then we'll have some discussion.
Thank you. And Dorsal's going to pull up my slides. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Dorsal. So let's go to the next slide. So thank you, Mayor Ralph. That's a fantastic introduction. As alluded to, between awarding these projects, SKIP funds, and when construction starts, projects often change. This could be the AMI level, the unit mix, the total number of units, the building footprint, how they're asking SKIP funds to be used, and the number of units for specific populations. And we just went through a lot of those changes on the project, so it's kind of fresh in your minds about what some of those changes are. That said, there is nothing scarier to an affordable housing developer than a compromised funding award. So SKIP awarded projects have changed since council's approval, which we just went through and are listed on the slide as well. There's one additional one there from Lehigh, which we funded last year. And we recently received notification that there's one fewer unit in the project. There's been unit mix changes. It sounds like different types of bedroom, fewer certain bedrooms, more of another kind. And they have some updated schematics to share with us as well. So the executive board has not discussed your interest in notification when projects change. And so I am hoping to seek clarity today from you. And next slide, please. So it's my opinion that there are only a few reasons a project that has been awarded funds by SKIP needs to return to councils for approval. These are listed on the slide, and these are also what our sister organization, Arch, on the east side, communicated to me is the times that they have gone back to their councils as well. So the first there listed on your slide is when the physical location of the project changes. This is inspired by the recent Kenmore to Redmond project, where one city didn't want to host that project anymore. And instead of the project falling apart, it moved to another city. Second on there is when an applicant submits another funding request through our Housing Capital Fund process for the same project, and the executive board recommends it for funding. So this would include the 3 projects that you approved today, and which are returning to your councils for concurrence. Then there are always circumstances that are unknown currently, but will hopefully remain a mystery to us as well. And then next slide, please. So my goal here is to provide you, the board, with whatever updates you'd like when projects change, while also reassuring awarded projects that we're not going to revoke their award. So trying not to create any unnecessary strife for these folks. So I've developed some ideas for communicating project changes to you, which are listed on the slide. So one option is for you to receive a quarterly update on all project changes. And this option would assume that I would be moving the project forward in the meantime. Excuse me. So option 2 is to update you as changes happen at the next board meeting. This would assume that contracting for the project halts until the update is shared with you. So it's kind of the opposite to option 1, perhaps. And option 3 is to update you on larger changes and consider smaller changes administrative in nature. Oh, excuse me, I have to cough 1 minute. Pardon me. Okay. So this assumes that smaller changes would be handled at the administrative level and that the project move forward under those circumstances. And that the larger changes would halt the contracting process until the update is shared with you. So I'm going to pause there. I do have a list of what would be considered smaller versus larger changes. If you're interested in option 3, but if folks are more leaning towards option 1 or 2, that would be helpful to know as well at this time. So would love to hear what folks think, unless you would like to move on and hear a little bit more about option 3.
Claire, I think it would be helpful to understand the difference between what you're considering smaller and larger changes. I know, again, in previous conversations and that the list that you shared, I think some of the things that are on my mind are changes in the population served. Is it going from, seniors at 50% AMI to transitional housing? That's a big change. Is it going from a home ownership project to a rental project? Is it going from families to single men? Like those types of things, I think, are the considerations that certainly board members take into account when we approve things. And to me, those are significant changes, but I'd really like to see what your list contemplates.
Super. Let's check it out. Next slide, please, Dorsal. And you must be reading my mind because one of those items you listed would be considered an update to the board, the population change. You can see the third one on the left side. So this includes, so on the left column, this would be the larger changes, I would say, when an update to the board would come forward. Column on the right, we would consider administrative changes, and I would just move the contracting forward, and you wouldn't necessarily receive an update that these things happen, because we would agree that they would be administrative in nature. So on the left, to update the board, that first item, if a project has a greater than 10% AMI change. So let's say they were going to be a 30% AMI project. Now they're going to be a 50% AMI project. That's an example there. On the right side, less than 10% AMI change. I think you get the idea. It's a smaller type of change. Added or reduced the entire project unit count by 20% or more. And if it's less than that, it would be an administrative change. If a specific population was added or entirely removed from the project, as Mayor Ralph mentioned, as an example. Use of funds on the administrative side. Let's say we originally said that funds were going to be used for construction, but now they want to use it for their soft costs or other development costs. To me, that's administrative in nature. You're still, the project hasn't changed. It's just how our funds are applied to the project, but we would be supporting that project either way. If the footprint change is greater than 20% or more of the total square footage, you may want to know about that. If the footprint change is less than 20%, maybe that's administrative. If the unit mix change on 50% or more of the units, so this could be they were going to do 50 one-bedroom units in a 100-unit project, and now they want to do 50 two-bedroom units. So that might be something you would want to know. Funds supporting different number of units. This would be like the Beery and Miller Creek example, where your funds are used in a different number of units. Change in project development budget is likely administrative. So I have a follow-up slide to this that will give you context. Dorsal, next slide. This shows you the examples we talked through today and how they would apply. So all of the projects would be considered, you would receive an update under using this criteria, except for the Skyway project changes.
Victoria, you have a question?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just, as we're looking at this, I was wondering, at what point, Claire, are you notified? Is there contract language that before they make any change there, that Skip is notified first, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so so this is even before the contract. So this is so we are this close to finalizing a couple contracts, but really wanted to have this conversation with you all before we really finalize things and understand your perspective moving forward, because this will come up again and again. Yes, in the contract we have, there's a lot of language around when projects change, but I guess for the purposes of this conversation, my hope is to just understand where you all, the board are at before the contracting phase. So we're in this kind of waiting period, right? Where we've gone to councils, the councils have approved the awards for that, for those that the description presented. And then before we contract, I'm notified by the developers, oh, hey, by the way, the project has changed. Or like we experienced this year, we have 3 projects who are returning, seeking additional funds for the same project. And that way we know what the changes are, and we're able to make you all aware of it in an organized fashion, right? Every funding year, and go back to councils and let them know. And so, as we're taking on more and more projects, just having that clarity will be helpful, to know how you all want to move these things forward.
Thank you. So this would be strictly at this phase. We wouldn't anticipate changes after we've already gone to contract and they're starting construction. We should feel confident that at this point, before we actually enter into it, that we're good with what the plan is, right?
Yep. And just to clarify too, like in the contracts, there are times when changes will occur, and in the language in the contracts, they are required to notify me, the executive manager, and the contract language is very legalese. It says, that the executive manager has discretion. That said, we can have a conversation about, what should I do with that information then? But before we get to that conversation, I do want to know, even just before the contracting phase. So thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, a quick question. So today's Friday the 15th. Let's say, for example, early next week, you found out that a change was going to happen that you felt you needed to notify the board. Do you wait a month to tell us at the next meeting? Or because it's a big change, there should be some consideration to doing that sooner? In construction projects, a month it's a big delay. Time is money.
Yeah. So that's the other possibility you bring up, that was not listed, but an option is, as soon as the change is that I'm aware of it, I communicate that via email to you all. To your point, yes, time is money for the developers, and worrying that, the change isn't okay for their public funder can create a lot of heartache, and anxiety. So that's absolutely a possibility. It would, since it's kind of difficult to get confirmation from board members that they saw it or, approve it, like that would be difficult for me to get, over email. And so I would need the board's like thumbs up that so long as I communicate it out to you all and you receive it in an email, maybe there's a date in there that I say, if you have issues, please respond by, and give you a deadline for that so that I can give the developer an answer.
That's a good example that you bring up. And maybe taking that further, maybe email response could really clarify a direction. If more discussion is needed, it could go to the next board meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Liz?
Thank you. I do like that proposal, by the way, of, sending out via email and then, if we need more discussion moving forward. But I also had a little bit of concern about the 50% more of units on unit mix change. That seems like potentially a really big change that, changing, for example, if you had quite a few 3-bedroom units and suddenly, you've obliterated all the 3-bedroom units, but you're still less than 50% of all of the units. So I think I would recommend that maybe that also be in more the 20% range. So that's the only area that I had any concerns on that. I think this looks like a really great proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Liz. James.
Yeah, I think this is where I might suffer from being a little bit, I don't want to get too technical on it, but I think about these things often enough that I'm afraid of getting that way. Like following up on what you said, Liz, thinking about a unit mix change on 50% or more of units for multifamily, that seems right. But for home ownership, the home ownership developments are smaller, right? And so it might only be 6 units total or something. Like, do we have a minimum home ownership like number of units that we will fund, Claire, or do we fund it whether they apply for 4 units? Like 1110 is going to open up a lot of new 4-unit developments, and so if it's 50% or more, that is, well, 20% or more, that's just 1 unit changes on a 4-unit development, right? And yeah, I kind of don't care about that as much as whereas like the entire development on home ownership. Whereas for multifamily, absolutely, I feel like 50% is a little too high of a threshold and it should be lower. Like Liz is suggesting at 20% or 30%. So something, I don't want this to be such a chart where you've got, home ownership, the kind of the community land trust model versus multifamily versus preservation. And it's going to get so technical that it's just going to be cumbersome for us as city council people to like look at this and really be able to dig through what this change, will this change actually get away from the mission of SKIP and why all of our cities are involved? So I'm noticing my head going into these places that look at this is trying to get really technical about like, well, what would it really mean in this type of unit? There's other triggers though for me that would kind of maybe indicate that this is something I want to see, like, which is if they applied for LIHTC and they didn't get it, and then all of a sudden this project is going to fundamentally change so much that I can't even imagine they would pursue, like that they could even get close to meeting whatever our funding, our other funding requirements were, right? Like if a project doesn't get LIHTC, then they just may not be able to build on the same cycle, and they may be out of the running, or like if they don't get the housing capital fund, the trust, Washington State Housing Trust Fund, National Housing Trust Fund, which of course, as I was looking at this, it kind of raised this question of if we're really hoping to get out there early and help folks, if we're willing to be the first funder, is this the right timeline? Because all of these folks are also applying for all the fall NOFAs, and so on one hand, we're either way out early, which gives them lots of confidence that they're going to have funding for 2025 when they're applying for the other NOFAs. But it's also like, wouldn't it be nice to get this award in June or July before you start doing? So is our timing right on the whole funding cycle? I'm guessing you all have thought about this. This is my first time being on it. So there's a question there I have as someone who also applies for those. And then how technical do we really want to get? Because I think what I'm seeing here, like this almost feels too technical on this slide that's raised up here. I'm comfortable going that technical, but I think I would, honestly, it would just get lost in the shuffle on my email. If it wasn't like a meeting like this, where we're actually maybe quarterly just getting a roll up of all of them. If I was going to actually say something declarative here, I'd say I'd rather we did it quarterly rather than monthly. I'd rather not get it via email because I think it's going to get lost in the shuffle. And I think this is about as technical and deep as I'd want to get. This stuff on the left, and I'd be open to a few changes, suggesting around the unit mix at 50%.
James, can I ask a clarifying question? So under option 3, a major change would pause contracting and a administrative change would not. So are you comfortable on on pausing contracting for a whole quarter?
I would
Or are
not
you
be.
referring
I
to the
see.
administrative changes? Cause
Good point.
I'll tell you, I would be fine getting a quarterly update on administrative changes, but not fine on getting a quarterly update on the things that are gonna pause contracting.
I agree. I think you're right. Because if we pause contracting, I'm thinking of the developer, especially the nonprofit developers, a quarter delay could put
Is
them out of the
a
running
lifetime.
to other
Exactly.
funding. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Thank you. Great point.
Christina.
Hello all. First off, Dana, thank you. You took that right out of my mouth. I like the idea of just a quarterly update on minute changes, but also, and here's just a thought, it will get lost in my email feed as well. I'm not the strongest emailer. What if we make the decision to distinguish between small and large changes? Once the large changes come, I also agree, I forget who said it, but even waiting a month for a developer, that is also a lifetime. And so our skip meetings are 2 hours long, but if there was a 30-minute, they don't have to happen often. Well, hopefully they don't happen often, but if there was a 30-minute, assuming we get a quorum or a response on, I can show up or I cannot show up. Just something that really puts it in front of us and quickens the process. Like James said, though, if we get too technical on what the large and the small is, I agree. We should stick to the mission. Does it serve our mission? Because we're small right now, but God willing, if we grow and we have multiple projects going on, and there will be multiple changes happening, and that will be a blessing. What does that look like for Skip and for this executive board? We can't drown ourselves in the changes as well. So I'm in line and in favor with, assuming does this serve the mission? And I know Claire has been doing a great job and she has certain privileges for ILA with the contractors, but with the developers, but I'm comfortable with this list that Claire presented. Thank you, Claire, because I feel like as we grow, we may kick ourselves in the rear by just wanting to hear about everything that happens. And as long as it just goes with the mission, is in line with our mission. That's why we created that, right? We have certain requirements, and I would like to see it stick with that mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Sanari.
Yeah, Claire, I think you spoke at the beginning and now I've sort of blanked on what you said about how Arch influenced your looking at this. And just because I think almost maybe all of the projects have multiple public funders in, and there ends up typically at the point when a change in a project is starting to raise alarm bells for one funder, it's raising them for the other. And so I'm sort of wondering, trying to avoid how we end up in a really strange cycle of like, well, Claire has to pull together the board to have a conversation about a major change, but then by the time we have the conversation, Arch has done something and the county and the state have done something. So how does this proposed process interplay with conversations with other public funders who are in the same project as us, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the timing. But I think that really, I guess what I'm trying to get at is the interest level of the board for delving into these types of issues. I think that we are having I am having conversations in these regional meetings with the other public funders. So folks are aware of it. but they have a completely different review process and recommendation process. So they, at King County, at Commerce, they are doing all of this administratively. They select the projects administratively. Their electeds never, they don't, they don't say, this is our priority, go and fund it. The staff in these organizations are the ones doing it. And so they are under a completely different, structure of it. And so since we have a very thorough process through our advisory board and then our executive board and getting approvals from councils, we're under some different constraints. And I should say too that when our councils approve these projects, the ILAs don't say anything about, if a project changes, you need to go back. You got to get right. It's very hush. It's very silent on that. And all it says is that they must approve the project description, like language that's flexible enough that we wouldn't need to go back to councils to get reapproved. And so all of these recommendations are just, it's up to us, right, to decide like what's that threshold for this group. So I don't know if that is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you're right, this is new. There's a lot of interest. As usual, I try to stay out of this because the county doesn't contribute funds, and I just try to think about, practical matters. And I think the practicality of what is it that it's important for us to know versus where is it that we're finding something is going to be in jeopardy in some way. Like, at what point would we actually say we want to pull the money from a project? And I would think that to me really comes from like eligibility issues, and that, more so than anything else. Like, at what point are we no longer meeting the terms of the funding? Yeah, but again, my 2 cents without having a strong stake in this.
Yeah. So, James, before I call on you and then Tracy, so Claire and Nancy and I had a conversation about this, and I think all good points. My concern comes more from a trustability with the community sort of standpoint. When we approve a project and we know that this is it's going to be, and then we're talking to neighbors or we're talking to other organizations, like this is what's happening. And then there's a change. It goes from senior housing to transitional housing. That's a big deal to neighbors. I don't think it's necessarily so much even like we're gonna knee jerk and pull the funding. It's about understanding of the why, so that when we go back out and talk to the community, we can explain that, because I for one hate nothing more than not knowing something, because that's going to be the day that somebody asks me a question and I'm going to be like, oh no, that Pandean project is going to be senior housing, and really it's not. It's single men transitioning out of homelessness. Very different project. And so that's kind of where my interest in having this conversation arose from. The other thing that's not on this list that's kind of a big deal for me is who's the nonprofit providing the services, because whether anybody is going to be willing to say it on a recorded line or meeting or not, there are nonprofits that I want to work with in my city, and there are ones that we have a history of that we are not going to want to work with. And that matters, right? So just for awareness and accountability, I feel like it's important, if we've approved a project, that what gets paid for is actually what we approved. And that's really where this came from, not so much in an interest in like upending things, but I don't know. So there's my soapbox. James.
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question that gets down to like, well, how can we just have I think, less technical review on our side. Like, does the advisory board review this stuff already, Claire? Like, they make the recommendations that we then approve, but do they have thresholds like this, at which point it goes back to the advisory board?
No, we haven't done that yet. And so I wanted to have this conversation with you all first.
Dana is saying, by the way, like when is it going to actually make it a community impact, right? That certainly be accountable for. But I think the advisory board takes a deeper look at these projects than we do. And that seems like a group that I would want to have heard from, because I also don't like overriding advisory boards, right? So if they said, hey, I thought we funded this thing, and then we're all coming around together and saying, no, we saw a change we didn't like. And I agree. I also don't want to pull funds from anyone if we can avoid it, right?
I think my struggle is that the advisory board doesn't see the change. So even honoring their input is they deeply reviewed a project and said, this is what's moving forward. If there's a significant change, then the project is no longer what they approved either.
So I'm wondering, do they already see it and decide that? And then is there an opportunity there where we're hearing from them, like, hey, we are the ones who did the deep dive, and this is not okay. This does not feel like the thing we approved. But I also don't know what the cadence is of their meetings. But if we think, have the best first look at it, why are we not? Or is that cumbersome? Is it just adding yet another group to it, right? I'm not trying to just add more groups to all these reviews. I'm just trying to think of ways that this group of folks can get the best information possible before making a decision that could affect the funding.
Yeah, I mean, it does add a layer and it adds time. I mean, they do meet monthly. And so there would be kind of a waiting period, additional time. That assumes that we're waiting on confirmation from you all to move forward, to continue the project moving forward, right? Whereas to Mayor Ralph's point, if the goal is to just know about these changes so that you can communicate it out and be open and transparent about it, then that kind of changes it, I think, a little bit. So
I do think there should be a place. So, and all respect to the advisory board. At the end of the day, it's going to be us that are standing there defending or not a project. And so I can envision there being a significant change where at some point it's going to be like, brakes on, this is not what we said we were okay with. And so having something built in, and I'm also open to, like, let's try this for a year and then revisit it. So Christina, to your point, like, if it becomes really cumbersome or we don't see any issues and we're now trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist, I'm completely open to that. But so the catalyst of all this is when Claire and I met and she says, Pandian's changed and here's the 10 changes. I was like, wait a second, that is not the project that I think we agreed to. And so trying to build something in to prevent those surprises and allowing for conversation at this group's level. Tracy.
Thank you. Agreed. Especially, I'm hearkening back to your statement about you're not as interested in upending a project as just knowing. So what if we had a policy where this chart stays intact? Footprint change, and if you want to even change footprint change, unit mix change less than 25%, 20, whatever we say in it's just an email. It's just a notification. That's the update. That's what the idea is here, to get the update. And with a little note at the email that says, if there's anybody concerned enough, or if there is anyone who would like to convene a board meeting to discuss, please respond. If you don't get any responses, then the board isn't interested. And so you could, like Dana said, you could do this for a year. And the idea is mostly to get updates if there's an item of concern and you have a majority that wants the meeting, then we can work on that. What do you think?
Majority or the city that the project is based in.
Oh, there you go. So if you this proposal here is an update, is for updates. So I agree with the updates. It's just, it's an email and attachment. And then leave it to the board. Just give a little note. Leave it to the board. A majority of the board wants to meet, or if there's somebody that has a severe, or what do you want to, you know, robust concern, then we can bring that forward.
I mean, that works for me. That, you know, thank you.
Liz.
Thank you. I would be in accord with that as well, Tracy. I like that suggestion. And I was just going to ask Claire, how often does it happen that there would even be one of these projects changing enough given this criteria to update? I would assume it would happen a couple of times at the most every year. That it's so I don't want to put a whole ton of structure in place as well for something that doesn't happen very often, but at the same time, providing that notification so that if there is something that is concerning people, we have an opportunity to dive in further.
Yeah, I mean, so this is all pretty new for us, right? So we're still learning when these things happen. But I can tell you, you know, the Burien Miller Creek we knew about in May, Pandean we knew earlier in the year, and then Burien Family Housing we knew when we received their application for additional funds, and we knew in detail everyone's changes when they submitted new applications. This funding round. So that is when we will likely receive, you know, the bulk of the changes, in which case none of this really matters because you're going to get this information at this type of meeting when you consider the recommendations for funding. But the Pandean project, you know, is something where we did work with City of Kent staff, the planners, and our staff work group member to just make sure that you know they knew what was going on. It's always, I always want to defer to the cities, and that will, I hope you all know that I do take you know the independence of our jurisdictions very seriously, and just really want you folks to know that that's very important to me. But the Lehigh project, we got a call last week. And so, you know, within a year, we had four potential one-offs. But the bulk came through the annual Housing Capital Fund process.
That's helpful. Thank you for that update. So I think given that, I would be in support of some notification via email, and then if there are significant concerns, you know, convening a meeting to discuss further.
Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, you know, you don't have to hear a lot from me. Everybody has already said it. And Claire, I think you've given a great explanation, but I'll just restate lightly from my own point of view. And I think the point of view of Normandy Park, it really just is a fiduciary question, since these are tax dollars and the city's maintaining directive control. And for me, I think that when a change happens, sometimes the change crosses a line of what we would consider the philosophy of what we're supporting. And or a change can go in a direction that starts to maybe exceed philosophically what the voters might be interested in our municipalities. And I think that's probably where the concern for us would come up in Normandy Park is, what is it that we're supporting and how do we describe that to our residents? But I think everyone's already talked it out, and we've got great explanation from Claire, and I think a good plan for moving forward. But I find that more and more, even this month, we've been talking a lot about it. Our philosophical difference is important, and I think they are, and it really kind of can come down to the philosophical questions of what are voters and residents most interested in.
Yeah. no, I think that's exactly fair. And that's really the basis of where my questions sort of started. So, Evan.
So this is Evan Maxim. Someone else has my name on the Zoom call, and I'm not
Oh.
sure who that person is who has their hand up.
That's hilarious.
Is it me, Mayor Rolfe? This is Brian Davis, Federal Way.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why I'm named Evan, but Evan's a good guy. So
You were,
I'm
well, and
just
you
fine
were
with that.
Brian, you were Brian before. So, that's
As
weird.
CTEC City Council, am I supposed to care that someone's impersonating my CED director? Is there a voting thing I can do here?
Evan's a
All
good
right.
guy. I'm flattered to be in his name. So, I agree with Mayor Rolfe. From our perspective, like one of the worst things to happen is to have an elected official surprised by something. At the same time, we have development regulations that allow for flexibility of development proposals to go through minor amendments versus major amendments. So the minor ones are done administratively. So in principle, I support the idea behind this. I think to help it work for me, what I would ask is that when the jurisdiction is notified that there's a proposal, that part of that notification include these flexible provisions, so that when we notify the council, we also indicate what the flexibilities are, so that when they see the proposal, they also know what they're ultimately allowing if there is any changes to the proposal. And if the flexibilities are too much for them, then they have the option of saying, we're not comfortable with this, and we can negotiate further. But I think just having that, whatever we end up, whatever flexibilities we decide on, is to include those with the notice to the cities. And that way the councils are fully informed of just what exactly they're approving. So that's my 2 cents.
So Brian, I really appreciate that, and a clarifying question. So I am in this notification / potentially conversation process. I am not proposing that it then goes back to council for a revision. It's an executive board, like, awareness kind of thing. And then it would be up to an individual city, I think, to determine whether it becomes additional council action.
Yeah, what I was saying is just when the very, very first, when we're notified of a proposal, we give them these flexibilities so that they know
Perfect.
ahead of time, not that they're making a decision on whether or not to take it up again, but just when they make the initial approval, they know what's
Where the flexibility lands.
exactly. So it's like a capital project with a
Yep.
20% contingency. They're approving the full
Got it.
budget. They're not approving 80%.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So, thank you for that. Tracy.
So it looks like we have consensus on this process. The only thing I'm unclear about is the 50%. So what I would like to do is put forward if the unit mix change is 70% or more, and if we have a majority that likes that, then we go with it. If we don't, then we do 50%. Or would you be good with that for me?
70% or 25%? We talked about lowering that.
Yeah.
Not raising
So
it.
you want to do 75%? So if we get a unit mix change on 70% or more.
No, I think that the proposal was dropping that. So if a unit mix changes by 20 or 25%.
Well, that's what I meant. So we're just on two different sides of the column. So you can say if the unit mix change is on less than 25%.
Yeah.
So on the other side, it would be unit mix change of 75% or more. Same line, just it adds up to 100, but it's 75-25 instead of 50-50.
Yes.
That makes sense? So I wanted to offer that and fill the board out. And if everybody likes 50-50 and they're fine, then we'll leave it in. It sounds like we have a process.
Can I
Liz?
clarify?
Yeah.
What I think I was trying to propose that there not be anything more than 20 or 25%. So that if it's written as it's written, it would say unit mix change on 25% or more or less of units, I guess, right?
It's, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
Or
only.
more, 25% or more.
Yeah, you update the board.
Mm-hmm. If there's more than 25, a unit mix change on more than 25% of the unit.
5% of the units. Yep.
Yes, okay. And administrative, if it's less than.
Yeah.
Less than 25% change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
So-
thank you.
Okay. So
Do I make a motion on something like that, or do we just get some head nods?
this is not, this isn't necessarily set for an action item. I think, we certainly can do that if we're, so Claire, can you pop back to the slide before this?
Are you still there? Thank you.
So what I am hearing, and then I guess this would be the request for the motion, is that the board is comfortable with option 3 with that change on the unit mix to 25%. So Tracy, if you want to go ahead and make a motion, we get a second, we'll just make it official.
Okay, I got to look at it again. So if you could switch back, Claire.
Oh, I think.
So
Sonari, wait, hang on one second. Sonari, do you
Yeah,
have a
just want to
question
make
before we-
sure, 'cause I'm having Friday brain, return to work brain. When I read, what I just read on the slide about option 3 still halts everything, which I think was not our intent, right? So we do need to amend that a little bit for the Tracy proposal. Is that what you were just asking Tracy to do? I'm
no,
sorry.
it's just, the idea wouldn't be to, this has to do with updates, right? We're
Right,
not
and that's-
halting anything.
That's what I'm
So
saying,
we
is when I
just-
look at that second bullet, larger changes would halt contracting process until the update is shared with the board. So
Oh,
just making sure that we're pretty crisp as
Yeah.
we're putting the motion together that incorporates what Tracy said earlier
Yeah.
in the conversation.
Yeah, so what I think we ended up with, and thank you, Sonari, for pointing that out, is that larger changes, and Claire, maybe a little bit of wordsmithing on your part, that the board would be notified of larger changes, and if a concern is raised, that would halt until we had until we went through, right? That's, if there's no concern raised, then it's just a notification.
Yep.
yeah.
And Mayor, could I ask a quick clarifying
Yeah.
question? Because earlier there was discussion about being a board majority or the member city.
The member city.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then this is, sorry, one more point of logistics, because I'm not super familiar with OPMA. Is there something that we are inadvertently triggering if we put in a majority? Like, how do we assess a majority without essentially taking a vote over email? Like,
Yeah, so I get thank you. My other question is related, I would need to is your intention that I would need to hear from?
No,
a
I
majority?
think that it's that default, right? If you don't, it's absent any concern, it's confirmation of support.
Got it.
But what if there's only 1 or 2 people that have concerns? That wouldn't be a majority. So does that fall back into we would have to get a certain number of concerns?
A majority or the city where the project is located, maybe.
I like that.
I think there should be some consideration to the city it's located in.
I like what you said, Dana.
Tracy.
So, do you want me to, you looks like you're taking good notes, Claire. Do you need me to make a motion?
I would love a motion.
Okay, so I'll need that slide back again.
I think
I move to amend on the, for the updating the board with regard to unit mix that the board would be updated if the unit mix change is on 25% or more of the units, population served AMI, and that the corresponding administrative change equals 100%. You know,
You got a second?
75.
Did I hear a second?
Yeah,
I
James
think
Level
somebody
CTAC,
did.
second.
Okay. All right, any discussion on this? Do we feel like we've landed in a good spot? All right, seeing no discussion, hearing no discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Sorry, I'm also an I was just late.
No worries. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you for that discussion, y'all. I really am grateful
Hey,
for.
could I ask one clarifying question?
Absolutely.
We talked about an email that might go out to everyone. Would the host city of the project, Claire, could we consider that, you know, maybe you'd give them a phone call,
Oh, yes.
the host city? I mean, I like the idea of, is that too much?
No, that is what I always do anyway. Yeah,
Thanks.
that's my practice. And whether it's the board representative or your staff work group member or the lead planner, you know, that's there are always efforts for yes, making those phone
Okay.
calls. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
So
We
can
Oh,
I
go ahead.
can I just reiterate, because I think we landed on the revision to the chart, which is
Yep.
great. Thank you. And just to reiterate, it sounds like you all favor option
Option
three via an email. And a note in there about if there are concerns, please share them with me. If there are concerns that come up from a majority of the board in that email, and to the OPMA issue, we will not be replying all. It'll be directly to me. Or if we hear from, or if I already know about an issue from the host city, that's something, you know, we can talk about too. And then of course, yes, phone calls will always be made to the host city, where those changes happen. So I just want to reiterate that, and that the contracting, will just continue to move forward, at all stages, unless I hear that there's an issue from the majority of the board or from the host city. Can I get confirmation that's how I'm hearing it?
I
Great.
think that's where we're
Thank
at.
you.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. And we're good on that one. Thank you all.
Wonderful. All right, we are running just a few minutes behind, but I think that conversation was well worth it. So we'll fast forward really quick here. Our next, our last item is the third quarter progress report. So as you know, our ILA requires that we have this report. Normally Claire does it, but this covers the quarter that she was out. So we get to hear from Dorsal. So Dorsal, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Transitioning from tech geek to speaking, so give me just a second on this Friday. So in the interest of time, I won't cover the whole report, just a couple of key highlights, but if you'd like to see the full report, it's available in your agenda packet or in the email that Claire sent on November 8th at 4:47 p.m. Okay. So the third quarter of this year was time to prepare for our third annual Housing Capital Fund and the upcoming 2025 legislative session. It's important to keep in mind that none of SKIP's work is possible without the help of our staff work group and the South King County planners that make up the SOKIO group. Additionally, our success from July to September was empowered by the extensive preparations that Claire undertook before starting her leave, and the immense amount of support that I received from Jeff Tate during Claire's absence. And so I just want to acknowledge both of them as well. The most significant work this quarter was in advertising and coordinating the applications for the Housing Capital Fund process that you just completed. Skip and city staff met with 7 potential applicants in Q3, and we received 6 total applications by the September 13th deadline. As part of this work, I spent time supporting the advisory board and preparing for the evaluations of the applications. This included coordinating presentations from the Department of Commerce and King County Housing Finance Program, which is a regular partner on most of the projects that we work together on. And I just really want to acknowledge the amazing work that the advisory board did. They spent a significant amount of time and effort in reviewing these over 100 documents to get to where we were today. And so I'm very, very proud and very impressed with their work. Outside of the Housing Capital Fund, the advisory board worked to share their expertise on practical solutions to ending the cycle of homelessness. And they also supported me in the September Affordable Housing Tour. Both the advisory board presentation and the affordable housing tour are available online, and the advisory board is incredibly excited to continue to support you and the work of SKIP in 2025. Of course, you know, the mission never stops, and so we also undertook efforts to prepare for the upcoming year. This included a presentation from the Association of Washington Cities on the upcoming 2025 legislative session and updating our legislative priority flyer for what will be an important budget session this year in Olympia. SKIP staff also participated in work alongside King County Public Health and the University of Washington and the City of Auburn to prepare our region for changes to our climate, which are disproportionately impacting South King County when compared to the rest of the county. While the current work is specific to the City of Auburn, King County Public Health is hopeful to expand this effort across South King County so that all of the SKIP member cities could potentially benefit from this effort. So those were just a couple of the key highlights from the progress report, and I'm happy to turn it over to Claire to review the budget update.
Before we do that, Dorsal, thank you so much for all of the work that you did while Claire was gone, the report, like just everything. It's big shoes to fill, and you did a fantastic job. And I just want to make sure that I say that out loud. So
thank you. It really was an honor and a privilege.
All right, Claire, budget.
Thank you, Dorsal. So can you all see the screen here at the budget? All right, super. So let's begin with operating revenue. So we are talking about the fund status as of the end of September. So these figures may look familiar. These are your operating contributions in this column here, and then your Housing Capital Fund contributions for this year as well. All of this is the same as the Q2 report, except for this very large interest earnings number at $347,000. And this is interest earned across all of our funds. And this number is due to the current high interest rates and the $11.2 million fund balance in our Housing Capital Fund, since we have not moved to final contracting with our projects yet. So we are benefiting greatly from that. Last year's interest earnings were rolled into this year's beginning fund balance. So right here, the 377. And given the large size of the interest this year, we will need to have a conversation at budget time about what you would like to do with these funds. Operating expenses total $211,000. You can see that down here. And this is a bit lower than I would say would be normally given my maternity leave and pausing my wages during those summer months. And so right now we are at our estimated operating ending fund balance at $868,000. But if we remove those interest earnings from that, we are still at a healthy $521,522. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions on the budget? Okay, not seeing any, so that's a good thing. Thank you for that overview. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Claire, for any updates as we get ready to close out the meeting.
Yeah, we are doing so good on time. It is that season again. We are currently accepting nominations for the chair and vice chair for next year. So please let me know if you would like to nominate yourself or would like to nominate someone else. Ideally by December 20th. Hopefully we will be electing the chair and vice chair at our first meeting in January. Because you all have taken the one action item you absolutely needed to do today, which was approving the Housing Capital Fund recommendations. We will be canceling December, which is our it's what we usually do as a just a break during the holiday season. So this will be our last meeting of the year. And it's been a good year, so it's been great. Also, just an announcement, I will be attending the Affordable Housing Finance Conference in Chicago next week, November 18th through 20th. Then I will be out of the office November 21st and 22nd. And likely around the holidays, December 23rd through January 6th. Dorsal and myself will be out of the office, and Skip offices will be closed November 20th and 27th. And just a heads up that there may be, that there will be a slight modification to the legislative priorities talking points that we sent out via email, I think earlier this month. Just a slight change to help, I think, all of our member cities have a more have our talking point in there about NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, and the location of that, where we want to preserve that. We wanted to broaden that just a little bit, so we'll be resending those soon. And then for some end of year, early next year check-ins, I'll be reaching out to each of you in the coming weeks to schedule some time to connect about all things Skip and hear how this year went for you. So please be on the lookout for that invite. And then finally, Congressman Smith's office reached out to connect about a bill he's planning to introduce November 19th that would create a HUD grant program to encourage local governments to reform zoning and permitting. It would promote and incentivize prefabricated housing construction, build partnerships with local governments and community land trusts, and create a national building code to standardize and streamline affordable housing development. So I have a lot of information about this in documents. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me. And that's all I have.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Again, thank you all for the fantastic conversation today and always. It's one of the things I really look forward to about this meeting is got a really good group that is willing to engage in that conversation. So that, like I said, that's the bottom of the agenda. It's right at 3 o'clock. So hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and we'll reconvene in January. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.